Today, we're recording here on May 12th, and for some of the listeners that have been with us for the longest time, this marks the first full year of the Sean S. Show. And to all of the listeners, whether this is your first time listening to us today or if you've been with us this past year, it has been an amazing ride, and it's been the honor of my life. Honestly, I am not kidding when I say that. I love politics. Politics is a passion for me, and when you guys listen to this show, you give me a platform to talk about this, give my thoughts, and I'm telling you, I know that I'm not very robust when it comes to my schedule and producing these episodes, but I try very hard to do this, and it's so much fun for me. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all your support, and thank you to the great team we have here at Ishan Media for all the excellent work that you guys do in making this show possible every day. Thank you. And thank you to all our great supporters who repost us, retweet us, like our tweets, check out the show, our subscribers for the Political News blog. You are all the life and blood of this show. And so, we have also made an upgrade, as you might have been able to tell with the microphones right now. We are making that upgrade. We are striving for excellence because in the past year, as I've grown this show and, Ishan Media, the company, I have realized that this show means so much to me, and I want to give my listeners the best experience. So stay tuned, because now that school is almost over for me, I'm available now, and I can start focusing on this show and the website and all these great things, because we have a lot of interesting and great things in the works for you, the listener. So again, thank you so much for all this great work that you do. And if you could do the Sean S. Show a favor and share this episode on all your favorite episodes, and share the website, anything you can do to help out, it means the world to me. So thank you so much, and the great episode that we have planned for you starts right now. Welcome back. Abortion Showdown. Last week, in a shocking leak of a draft opinion, Politico reported that the Supreme Court was planning on overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade decision in a 5-4 ruling. This leak sent shockwaves throughout the country on both sides of the political aisle, as one of the most contentious topics of modern American politics is slowly approaching a decision.
We're going to, after 50 years, decide a woman does not have a right to choose within the limits of the Supreme Court decision cases, number one. But even more, equally as profound is the rationale used. And it would mean that every other decision relating to the notion of privacy is thrown into question.
We'll talk about the fallout from the decision, what both sides have been saying, what's next, and how this affects the November midterms. Today, May 13th, 2022. From Ishan Media, this is the Sean S. Show, a podcast about the interesting and ever-changing world of American politics, all from the perspective of a 15-year-old. With me, your host, Ishan. Welcome back to the Sean S. Show. Thank you so much for joining me here today after another one of this season's long hiatuses. As we come closer and closer to the end of the school year, it's becoming a lot harder to actually produce episodes. But rest assured, we have everything under control, and I think we can promise a nice and fun season 2 for the next few weeks of the summer. So thank you for your continued support, and thank you for listening to this episode and all the others. And as usual, with the long hiatus comes a lot of news since we last talked in March. So first off, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, President Biden's first nominee to the Supreme Court, was confirmed by the Senate in a 53-47 vote. With her confirmation of the court, Jackson will become the first black woman to be confirmed to the Supreme Court. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has continued to persist in the days and weeks since we talked. It's been that somewhat of a stalemate as Ukraine has continued to put up a strong and unexpectedly fierce resistance to the Russian forces invading the country. However, there have been some more moves on the part of the Russian army in an effort to get closer to some success in their invasion. They're becoming more and more aggressive in an attempt to change the tides in their invasion of Ukraine. And while Ukraine has been able to resist, there have been many instances of war crimes being reported in the past few weeks, most of them being committed by the Russian army. They have warranted international war crimes investigations and condemnations from various countries and world leaders around the world. And in other news about this crisis, the country of Finland has announced that they will be joining, they have officially endorsed a plan to join NATO. So that's another huge development in this ever-changing global crisis, and we'll be keeping an eye on that. Inflation is another hot topic right now as we are hitting a 40-year high on prices that Americans pay for everyday products. As this situation has persisted, the Biden administration has been facing more and more criticism for their handling of the inflation situation. The latest Consumer Price Index report, a key inflation figure, shows that consumer prices rose 8.3% compared to just a year ago. And that is one of the highest numbers since 1982, when inflation was a major crisis back then as well. There's some breaking news out of the House right now, the House January 6th committee, where just today they voted to subpoena 5 House Republican members, including House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. In a statement to the press, Chairman Benny Thompson said, quote, "The Select Committee has learned that several of our colleagues have information relevant to our investigation into the attack on January 6th and the events leading up to it. Before we hold our hearings next month, we wished to provide members the opportunity to discuss these matters with the committee voluntarily. Regrettably, the individuals receiving the subpoenas today have refused, and we're forced to take this step to help ensure the committee uncovers facts concerning January 6th. We urge our colleagues to comply with the law, do their patriotic duty, and cooperate with our investigation as hundreds of other witnesses have." End quote. More information on this on the ShawNeshShow.com. Okay, those were some major headlines in the news in the past few weeks. Now let's get into the biggest story that we are seeing right now, which is the leaked Supreme Court draft. Now, for some context, Roe v. Wade thing we're talking about is a very important Supreme Court decision in American politics, and you don't generally see these types of cases happen a lot. But specifically pertaining to Roe v. Wade, it's a landmark ruling in judicial politics that has really set the stage for the right versus the left trope in American politics right now. So it was a ruling in 1973 that essentially ruled that a pregnant woman's ability to get an abortion is protected by the Constitution. Now, that ruling from 1973 sparked a decades-long debate about the right to get an abortion and whether or not it should be legal. To some people, it's a religious debate. For other people, it's a legal debate. And for some, it's a question of freedom. But whatever people think and whatever you think about this issue, we all have got to admit that abortion is arguably one of the most important and contentious topics in American politics. And it's important for us to understand it. Now, in the years since 1973, there have been various efforts to overturn Roe v. Wade and restrict abortion access, mainly from the right. It's pretty much been a Republican Party platform issue for decades now, and they've mainly spearheaded the campaign to restrict abortion access and overturn Roe v. Wade. They label themselves pro-life because they claim that they stand for unborn children. But then on the other hand, the Democrats have more recently made it one of their signature issues to prevent Roe from being overturned and also promote more abortion rights for pregnant women. They label themselves pro-choice, saying that they stand for giving women the right to choose on how they handle their pregnancies. So there's a brief overview of Roe v. Wade and the various parties involved. Okay, now on to that draft that I was talking about earlier. So early last week on Monday, Politico reported about how they obtained a draft of a Supreme Court majority opinion that was authored by Justice Samuel Alito. This would overturn the landmark Supreme Court ruling Roe v. Wade, which, of course, it sent shockwaves throughout our entire country because for a lot of reasons, really. Because number one, Roe v. Wade is such an key and important ruling in our nation's history. You want to talk about the Supreme Court and how it's one of the most secretive institutions that you are going to find anywhere in the world. I'm not even kidding when I say that. The Supreme Court is one of the most safeguarded institutions in the world. And just talking about the fact, talking about who's voting for this. Right now, our three liberal justices, who are Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Stephen Breyer, are all, as expected, voting against this. They're writing the dissent. But there's also Chief Justice John Roberts, who not everyone, always sees him as a conservative justice. He's been criticized in recent years for his stances, but he comes under that category of conservative justice because of what he's been doing in recent years. He's gone more down that moderate track. And in this leak that Politico obtained, it showed that Justice Roberts, his position really remains unclear at this time. Generally, in Supreme Court majority opinions, the Chief Justice is the one to write the majority opinion, the opinion on the case. But because Chief Justice Roberts was not writing this, and rather Samuel Alito was, it's surprising because now it's expected that Roberts probably did not want to completely overturn the decision, and it is expected that he will probably side with the court liberals. That's a pretty big deal. As for the majority, which includes Justices Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett, for them, Alito wrote, quote, "Roe must be overturned." And he continued to say, "The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision." And he said, quote, "Roe was egregiously wrong from the start and exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences." So that's the position of the court's conservatives. Now, let's talk about the impact of what's going to happen if and when Roe gets overturned. First off, you need to understand that abortion rights have been a very contentious topic, as I said in the opening, for a long time. But abortion has become even more contentious in the past 10 years, as more and more people have been paying attention to it, and it's become more relevant, if you will, in our society, with more and more people getting them. With this, you've seen an increase in the number of states making more restrictive abortion laws. For example, as I'm sure many of you have heard about what has been happening in many states, mainly Republican states, across the country over the past 2 years, of them passing these highly restrictive abortion laws in their states, making these cutoffs at 6 weeks, where most people don't even know that they are pregnant, right? So they are essentially trying to restrict abortion access within their state for, of course, the pro-choice, or rather, pro-life claims that they stand for. And so, really, they cannot ban it in their state because, as Roe v. Wade declared, it's a constitutionally protected right. So as you think about it, should this be overturned, Roe v. Wade, we are looking at a major victory for conservatives in general and many of these states, because about 13 of these states have laws in place that explicitly say if and when Roe v. Wade gets overturned, overturned, we will ban abortion in our state. It'll happen immediately. So for these states, for many of these people on this side of the aisle, it's a very big victory. But we also need to think about how this might affect liberals and Democrats. When you think about it, yes, on paper, it's a big victory for conservatives. It's one of the things they've talked about for 50 years, right? But when you think about the Democrats, really, I think it might be even bigger for them, because this has been one of those contentious issues that Democrats generally are more fired up about in terms of coming to the voting booth, because you hear about this all the time in those rallies and those speeches and what they, and the policies that they enact, especially after this, this significant increase in these restrictive abortion laws in so many states across the country. This might fire up Democrat turnout in the midterms, and I'm not trying to make any predictions just solely based off of this, but I think we can expect Democrats to turn out in high numbers. And might I remind you that this isn't finalized. The actual decision won't come out for a few months when the court's term is almost over. So when you think about it, then that only helps them, because that's going to continue to fire up their base, and that's probably going to be a large group of people that come out in November. Let's talk about the significance of the leak. The leak, well, mainly liberals have been shocked by the actual, what's in the leak. Many people on the right have also been outraged by the leak that's happened. Not what's in the leak, but rather the fact that there was a leak. They've been shocked. Senator Mitch McConnell in his speech talked about how he was so shocked by all of this, by the leak, as have other people. And many people are saying that they doubt they are not as confident in the court after this breach of the court's confidentiality. Chief Justice John Roberts commissioned court marshals to investigate where such a leak might have come out of. And really, right now, nobody knows who it is. If you were to ask me, I would think that I would say it's a liberal clerk who works for one of the liberal justices and must have been very shocked by the decision, the 5-4 ruling. We all had an idea that Roe v. Wade was going to get overturned, but when you see the news, it's a lot more shocking. And I think maybe that is what went through this liberal clerk's mind. And maybe that is why they leaked it, so that they could spark up this big media coverage of abortion and talk and sprout that outrage in their side. I've heard theories about it being a conservative clerk, about somebody who wants to leak it to the press to show the victory and to intimidate the justices into staying on their side. That's not as mainstream, but I've heard it, and it sounds interesting, right? Like all of these theories, because we don't know anything about it yet. But if the court does rule to overturn Roe v. Wade, then it would leave the decision of legalizing abortion to the individual states, rather than protecting it as a constitutional right as it is in the status quo. And as I said, nearly half of U.S. states already have laws in place that either ban abortion or will ban the practice upon the reversal of the ruling. And a decision won't be coming out for another 2 months. And this leak represents one of the biggest leaks in the court's modern history. All of that good stuff. Now, joining us right now to give us some insight into the abortion topic and to talk about what they think the significance of this ruling is Ishan Media's resident media technician and our newest political analyst, Ben S., who is going to join us and talk about this. Ben, welcome to the Ishan S. Show.
Hello. Thank you for having me on the Ishan S. Show for the first time. So what exactly do you want to go over with this topic?
It's a very loaded topic, as we all know. But going back to that thing about the midterms that I was saying, this is inherently a very political issue. So looking at the politics of overturning Roe v. Wade, what do you think this decision is going to do or what kind of impact do you think it's going to have on the November elections this year?
I think generally going into this election season, it's not only going to be unpredictable, but tense like it has been for the past 7 years since Trump was elected. And I think going off with this kind of tense vibe, popular rhetoric, especially from a lot of online discussions that I've been reading about, it really seems as if lately it's kind of a doomy or a gloomy season for Democrats because Biden just doesn't seem to be as progressive as people want. And I think especially going into the midterms with that kind of perspective, it seems to be more relieved now the fact that Roe v. Wade is going to probably be overturned because now Democrat voters are probably going to be more
Fired up.
fired up into trying to get more Democrat senators in there so that, nothing more happens. And I think the whole worry is that this could be some sort of catalyst where Republicans start gaining more influence over the American people. And especially with a lot of stories that I have been reading, a popular sentiment that's seemingly becoming a bit more popular recently from these kind of, I would say, more leftist voters, not even Democrat, but I would say more leftist viewpoints, are the fact that if Republicans get in office, they will continue to consolidate their power in America. And especially with headlines such as book burnings that go against the Republican viewpoints, and with states like Texas and Florida cracking down on abortion, there is seeming to be this kind of discussion of the almost like some sort of end to American democracy lately. And it's that kind of doom reading, I'd say, that is, of course, very debatable, but it's still a fear that it's seemingly a lot of people have on both sides. And I think that's where a lot of the tension starting to come from, is the fact that if one side wins, they'll consolidate the power. If the other side wins, they will. And that's why it kind of just seems so tense lately, because it's not as if both sides can agree or talk about something. It's literally one side wins, the other side loses. And that is incredibly worrying because we can't have a discussion at that point. And, I guess it is kind of corny to say, why can't we just talk about it? But it is a kind of a true statement, because it does seem in this political world of America right now, it's so much fear-mongering, just so much fear of the other side winning or losing and infracting on our rights. And I mean, of course, it's all been popularized by social media and discussions online about it. But I feel like that's kind of just the tensions that have been going on in elections recently. I mean, it just doesn't seem like we're having a normal democratic process now. I mean, even lately you had, the whole debate about Trump stealing the election. And, it just doesn't seem like we had these kinds of chaotic elections before. Sure, there were close calls, but none to this degree.
Right. And I think with the Roe v. Wade decision, we are looking at a far more, we're already in a very divided America, period. But with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it's naturally, I mean, regardless of where you are, you, the listener, wherever you lie on the political spectrum, we all know that Roe v. Wade, abortion, is one of the most contentious topics in American politics. So as you're saying, Ben, right now, if we do see it get overturned, which all signs are pointing at such, I think, this is really going to stir that pot of more division. And that really it's making it's making a big statement about American politics, the way we're reacting to this. Just about those protests that are going on outside the houses of Republican senators and conservative justices like Brett Kavanaugh. If it was the other way around, I'm pretty sure it would be, if the shoe was on the other foot, I'm pretty sure it would be everything against the liberal justices and all the Democrat senators. Right now, we're in this situation, and that's why we're seeing that. So I think what you are bringing up makes perfect sense. And in terms of at least just the idea of the division in our country, of course. And I think Roe v. Wade is probably going to, overturning it is going to push us even further in that route. Anyway, looking at what's been going on in recent weeks, of course, we understand it's been established, and I think we get the idea of liberal voters, of course, probably being more fired up to come out and vote. But what about just looking long term? Because as we do on the Shahnaz show, we always look a long way ahead. What do you think? How do you think this might impact, former President Trump, who we all know is thinking about running for president in 2 years? How do you think? Because again, we have to understand that 3 of those justices, Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch, are all Trump appointees who I'd say very much made this possible today. So how do you think this might factor into a potential Trump run? Do you think he's going to run on this platform of success saying, hey, look, I put these 3 justices on the court and they're the reason we're overturning Roe v. Wade? Do you think this might hurt him? How do you think the average, Trump supporter might react to this decision?
Well, I think overall Trump supporters would probably be elated at the news, but I think it comes to the question of what exactly the Republican Party is anymore, and especially the Democrats as well. But in the Republican side, especially after January 6th, it does kind of seem as if the party seems kind of split on supporting Trump or going with a new candidate, because I don't know if that's exactly what the RNC wants to do, going in the routes of Trump as he becomes increasingly more on the fringe side. I'd say it seems as if he's aligning more nowadays. So let's say like Alex Jones or something like that, and becoming that. I won't say he's not like Alex Jones.
Not necessarily there.
He's not. Yeah, he's not there.
Yeah,
of course. Alex Jones is kind of on his own place.
Right.
But it's just because of the fact that Trump was kicked off of social media, and they had to have him resort towards more obscure forms of trying to reach out to people, and I feel like that kind of influenced him in a more with like a bit more of a fringe side now. Like it does kind of seem like he wasn't as common in the news cycles nowadays than he was when he was president, and it's kind of hard to find him really, or at least just casually browsing around. Like before, you'd be just going on any social media or news site and you find a headline about Trump. Now
Right.
it's, it just seems like he just faded from people who weren't really following him.
That makes sense. And Trump still, as I've said in previous episodes, he is the leader of the Republican Party, but right, it's not very clear right now where he is. But I think, to give my thought on this, I just say that maybe with a decision like this, when we drive up Democrat voters, I also think going 2 years down the line, if in some way this helps Democrats in Congress and they come out victorious, I think this could very much help the potential Trump presidential campaign part 3, right? I think he can very well run on the platform of the fact that he helped fundamentally change the court, right? Because now there are these 3 young justices on the Supreme Court. Going back to the abortion thing, there are these 3 young justices on the Supreme Court who he got to appoint, who have basically helped overturn one of the biggest and most landmark decisions in American judicial history, modern at least. And it ranks up there with some of those very historic court cases. I'm not going to go into the court cases right now because, I'm not a legal scholar. But again, Trump can, I guess, take that credit. He can say, I put these guys in the court. I helped overturn this. Give me your vote, right? Any parting thoughts, though, Ben?
Well, yeah, I think that's a really great point about the fact that he is able to take those points. And of course, that will literally give him a bigger edge upon if he does run for president 2024. And I think if he does appeal more to the evangelical crowds even more now, of course, I mean, who else would you vote for? Like, you don't have any other candidate, and this candidate directly helped, like,
Facilitate that,
mhm,
right?
like your own viewpoints into American politics. And I guess, I guess that brings up the debate of whether, religion and the state and like the separation of that. But, it's still whatever the people think. And I think people would be more attracted towards Trump after this, even if they were on the, because, there was always, excuse me, those cases of people being just regrettably voting for Trump. Let's say, I watched this one video about one of these voters in the, deep in the coal country.
Like West Virginia type
Yeah,
of area.
like West Virginia. And what Trump said was he would help reinvigorate spending into more fossil fuels, which he did, but not necessarily helping these communities that were being left out of a green plan. Instead, he invested more in the pipeline. And I think that kind of abandonment of, I would say, the more disenfranchised voters.
Do you think this might be a bit more of a redemption then, the new Roe v. Wade thing, for those types of voters?
And that's the thing I don't know about.
Right.
Because I don't know if they were really into the whole religious debate or abortion like that. It could be a redemption. But I think at that point, it just depends on the fact that Trump's platform now is just truly religious based, if that's the perspective we're going into. I think before it did seem like Trump, he was this businessman. He seemed money savvy. He would help the country economically, help bring back jobs, and of course, he appealed to people who were being left out of a changing economy. And I don't know, and he didn't really do that, I'd say. But during his time, you did see employment go down. You did see the stock market go up.
It did, yeah. We
and
did see that.
It just depends on what platform he's deciding to run on again. And I guess that's kind of the point. Wait, what are you saying?
Oh no. That is what we're saying, right? We can't look into President Trump's mind right now. None of us can. So we have no idea what he's going to. Number one, if he's going to run, we know he's decided, but if he's going to run, we don't know what he's going to run on. But this gives him some nice points.
Yeah.
It does put in that little confusion into politics, but that is what American politics is these days, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, Ben S., thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
Very nice being here.
Of course. And to my listeners, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break. All right, and we're back from the break. So before we left, we talked about, what Roe v. Wade is. We talked about the Supreme Court leak, and we also had our guest on, Ben, to talk about the impact of abortion. Now let's just talk about some of the news that has been coming out of D.C. right now and across the country about specifically abortion. So, of course, as expected, in the days since that leak was reported, we saw so much action on all sides of the political spectrum. And, I follow this stuff very closely, and everywhere I looked for the next week, even today is Thursday, but even today when I was looking at stuff, abortion and Roe v. Wade have been dominating the headlines. They have made center stage on everything we talk about. And I've been talking to some people in politics, and they tell me this thing is going to die down. But when you think about it, it's going to die down. They're going to issue that decision. It's going to shoot right back up again, right? And it's not just Roe v. Wade. It is a few other decisions that are coming out of the Supreme Court in the next days and weeks that are going to send shockwaves throughout our country. And, that stuff is, however, is for another day, right? But why don't we also just talk about some of the news that's been coming out of D.C. on this matter in general? So yesterday, Wednesday, right, because we are recording this on Thursday, but so on Wednesday, Senate Democrats decided to hold a vote to codify Roe v. Wade. And essentially what that means is write it into federal law, make it federal statute, so that the federal government can protect abortion rights, all the provisions of Roe v. Wade. And they had a few expansions within that bill, but essentially to codify Roe v. Wade and make it the law of the land, secure it. Most people, including Democratic leadership, expected this measure to fail. And as expected, it did. And so the intention of this was basically to see who's voting which way. And so in the end, the tally came out to be 51-49. All 50 Republicans voted against the measure, and they were joined by West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who describes himself as, as a more, pro-life, as a more pro-life senator. So he did not he was not on board necessarily with this. And a few other moderates in the Senate, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Susan Collins from Maine, these people are wild cards in this discussion because they have expressed their outrage about the decision, the leaked decision, but they also are very confusing in terms of their views on it. And so getting those people specifically to agree with one another on how best to handle this issue is very difficult for Democrats. And so that's why it's not easy. So the reason Joe Manchin opposed this measure was he said it was because it was because of the fact that the Democrats' bill was way too expansive and that it would override certain state laws, which he said he was not comfortable with supporting. So that's why he voted against it. So then when asked if they made changes to it, made it a little less expansive, if he would vote for it, he said yes. But then on that side, then you lose some voters here. Everybody knows that you are not going to get the 60-vote filibuster-proof majority for a topic like abortion. So mainly Democrat leadership wanted this vote to see where their people stand and where the Republicans stand. And it's going to be a powerful midterm tool, I think, for them. But here's a clip. Take a listen to a clip from Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, who talked about this vote, followed by Vice President Kamala Harris, who presided over the hearing.
Justice Alito's draft opinion in the Dobbs case questions the very existence of the right to privacy. It argues that enumerated rights, that is, rights not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, unenumerated rights not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, must be deeply rooted in U.S. history and tradition in order to be recognized as a constitutional right. Who decides what is deeply rooted in history and tradition? The court's Obergefell versus Hodges decision established marriage equality only 7 years ago. Will the court's reactionary majority put that next on the chopping block? What about the right to contraception, as I mentioned before, established by Griswold versus Connecticut 11 years before Roe? Rather than settling the debate on abortion, the draft Dobbs opinion would further divide our fractious nation, set the stage for a radical majority on the court to erase even more constitutional rights. It would give government the power to dictate your rights and dictate your future. Women to carry unwanted or unexpected or even dangerous pregnancies to term.
This vote clearly suggests that the Senate is not where the majority of Americans are on this issue. It also makes clear that a priority for all who care about this issue, a priority should be to elect pro-choice leaders at the local, the state, and the federal level. Because what we are seeing around this country are extremist Republican leaders who are seeking to criminalize and punish women for making decisions about their own body.
And that was Vice President Kamala Harris on the matter. And so moving on to the most important player in the room, of course, at this time, President Joe Biden. We've not heard a lot from him and Democrats in general about how exactly they want to address this. Of course, this is a midterm tool for them to use, but what exactly are they going to do? They've not been very clear on this. But President Biden, after that leaked decision, did express his outrage. Here's a bit of a press gaggle right outside of a trip that he had last week. Take a listen.
It's been announced that it is a real draft, but it doesn't represent who's going to vote for it yet. I hope there are not enough votes for it. It's the main reason why I worked so hard to keep Robert Bork off the court. It reflects his view almost word. Anyway, look, the idea that it concerns me a great deal that we're going to, after 50 years, decide a woman does not have a right to choose within the limits of the Supreme Court decision in Casey, number one. But even more, equally as profound is the rationale used. Right. And it would mean that every other decision relating to the notion of privacy is thrown into question.
And for some Republican viewpoint, here is Senator Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader's statement on the Democrats' proposed bill.
From inflation to border crisis to violent crime, there's no shortage of problems that deserve attention. But alas, today, Democrats have decided to line up behind an extreme and radical abortion policy. Our Democrat colleagues want to vote for abortion on demand through all 9 months until the moment before the baby is born. A failed show vote that will only prove their own extremism. Democrats' radical bill is as extreme gets. It ignores modern science. It is tone deaf to public opinion. Nothing about their bill merely codifies the current case law on this issue. Their extreme proposal goes way beyond codifying the status quo.
Abortion, if you ask anybody in this country, they can tell you it is the most contentious topic that America is facing right now. So it's also a very fast developing story. And might I remind you again, this is not hard set. This is not set in stone. So we need to keep an eye out, and we need to be sure that we are covering this story all as best as we can, and we understand what is going on. So continue, stay tuned. We'll be covering more in the days and weeks ahead. And so that does it for us here today at the Ishan S. Show. If you liked my commentary, then go ahead and follow at Ishan S. Show on Twitter and at the Ishan S. Show on Instagram for breaking news posts and updates about the show. If you want to learn more about political stories, then check out my political news blog on the IshanSshow.com and enter in your email to subscribe, and just check out the IshanSshow.com. And do us a favor and share this episode and all other Ishan S. Show content with your friends and family. It is the best way for this show to grow and get more people listening to it, and it helps out so much. Thanks again for all your support, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.